The voices drifted through the hospital curtain before I could open my eyes. "She deserves to know," a man replied. "No," a woman said firmly. "Let her believe everything is still the same." I knew that voice. It belonged to my future mother-in-law. A sharp pain burned through my side as I tried to move. Then I heard the words that stole every ounce of hope I had. "Now that my son is healthy again," she paused, "he can finally marry the woman he was always meant to be with." My heart stopped. Yesterday, I had given her son one of my kidneys. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe if you love powerful stories about shocking betrayals, hidden truths, and emotional stories. We bring you unforgettable stories like this every week. And trust me, this one only gets more shocking. I wanted to believe I was still dreaming, but when I opened my eyes, the nightmare was only beginning. The machines beside my bed kept beeping. Slow, steady, almost cruel in the way they reminded me that I was still alive. Outside the curtain, nobody spoke again. A chair scraped against the floor. Footsteps. Then silence. I waited until I was sure they had gone before forcing my eyes open. The room blurred into white lights and pale walls. A nurse noticed me almost immediately. "Oh, sweetheart, you're awake." She smiled, but something about it felt careful. The kind of smile people wear when they're trying not to say too much. "How long?" My voice cracked. "How long have I been asleep?" "Since yesterday afternoon." Yesterday. The surgery had been yesterday. I instinctively reached toward my left side. The bandages were there. So was the pain. It wasn't unbearable. It was simply a constant reminder that a part of me now belonged to someone else. "How is he?" I whispered. The nurse's expression softened. "His surgery went well." Relief washed over me so suddenly that tears filled my eyes. I closed them before they could fall. For months, every doctor had warned us that time was running out. Every phone call had become another test result, another delay, another prayer. And when they finally told us I was a match, I never hesitated. Not for a second. The nurse adjusted my blanket. "Would you like me to tell him you're awake?" Before I could answer, the door opened. He walked in. His face looked pale. His steps were slow. But he was standing. Standing. A week ago, even walking across a room had left him exhausted. Now he looked at me with eyes full of emotion. "I've been asking to see you," he said. His voice broke before mine did. I smiled through the ache. "Looks like we're both hard to kill." He laughed. Only for a second. Then his eyes drifted toward the hallway, like he was making sure no one had followed him. When he looked back at me, something had changed. Not his love, not his gratitude. Something else. Something heavier. As though he wanted to tell me something, but was afraid someone else would hear. He reached for my hand. His fingers trembled. "I need you to trust me," he whispered. Before I could ask what he meant, the door opened again. His mother stepped inside. She looked from him to our hands. Then she smiled. It was warm enough to fool anyone. "Except me." "Sweetheart," she said gently. "The doctor says you need your rest." She turned to her son. "You've been here long enough." For the first time since I'd known him, he let go of my hand, without a word, and followed her out. The door closed behind them. I stared at it for a long time, not because I understood what was happening, but because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The woman who thanked me yesterday was not the same woman who had just walked out of my room. And somehow, the man I loved had become afraid of disappointing her more than he was afraid of losing me. That was the moment I realized my battle hadn't ended in the operating room. It had just begun. Recovery teaches you something nobody warns you about. Pain has a schedule. Hope doesn't. The next morning, I woke expecting him to be sitting beside my bed. Instead, his jacket was folded neatly over the visitor's chair. He wasn't. A nurse came in carrying my medication. "Has he been discharged already?" I asked. She hesitated. "He checked himself out early this morning." That didn't sound like him. He had promised we'd leave the hospital together. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. No messages. No missed calls. Just one text from him, sent at 6:18 a.m. "I'm sorry. I'll explain everything soon. Please trust me." I read it 3 times. Each time, it felt colder. By noon, I was discharged. My older brother, Gideon Mercer, insisted on taking me home. "You shouldn't be alone," he said as he loaded my overnight bag into his truck. "I won't be. He'll be there." I looked down at my phone. He said he would. Gideon didn't answer. He simply started the engine. When we pulled into my driveway, my heart lifted. His car was there. For one beautiful second, I thought I'd imagined everything I'd heard through that hospital curtain. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe his mother was angry. Maybe she'd spoken out of fear. Maybe. The front door opened. Not because he came running toward me. Because his mother walked out carrying a suitcase. She stopped when she saw me. The surprise on her face disappeared almost instantly. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. My brother frowned. What are you doing in her house? She smiled politely. My son asked me to help him pack. Pack. The word landed harder than the surgery. Before I could speak, he appeared behind her. His eyes met mine. Relief flashed across his face, followed almost immediately by panic. He hurried down the steps. Please, let me explain. His mother caught his arm. Not here. He looked at her, then at me. For a few seconds, it seemed like he was deciding which direction his life would go. Toward me, or toward the woman who had controlled every major decision he'd ever made. I'll call you tonight, he said quietly. I searched his face. Are you leaving? He opened his mouth. No words came out. His mother answered for him. We all need a little space. My brother stepped between us. Space. His voice was calm. My sister donated an organ to save your son's life less than 48 hours ago. Neither of them spoke. Gideon looked directly at my fiancée. You owe her more than silence. For the first time, I saw shame break through his expression. Real shame. Not the kind people perform. The kind that makes it difficult to look someone in the eye. I'll explain everything, he whispered. I promise. His mother picked up the second suitcase. Let's go. He stood perfectly still. Then, slowly, he turned around and followed her. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong. Because I couldn't understand what had just happened. The man who had begged me to marry him. The man who had wept when I agreed to donate my kidney. Had just walked away without even asking if I was well enough to stand. As Gideon helped me inside, he stopped in the hallway. Something isn't right. I know. No. He looked back through the window at the empty driveway. I don't think he's leaving because he wants to. I stared at him. What do you mean? Gideon's jaw tightened. I think somebody just made him choose. And for the first time, I wondered whether the greatest betrayal wasn't what I'd overheard in the hospital, but why the man I loved looked like he was being punished for loving me. The doctors said recovery would take 6 to 8 weeks. They were wrong. My body started healing. My heart didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the pain, because I kept replaying the look on his face. He hadn't looked relieved. He hadn't looked happy. He looked broken. Around 10:30, my phone finally rang. My heart raced. It was him. I answered before the second ring. Hello. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I heard him take a shaky breath. I've been trying to find the courage to call. I closed my eyes. Then start with the truth. Another long silence. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. I never wanted to hurt you. Tears burned my eyes. But you did. I know. Then tell me why. I waited. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he whispered, if I tell you the truth, I'll lose everyone. Before I could ask what he meant, the call ended. Not because he hung up, because someone had taken the phone from him. The last thing I heard was a woman's voice saying just one sentence. I told you this was over. I called back immediately. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. By the fourth attempt, I stopped dialing. If someone wanted to keep us apart, calling a fifth time wasn't going to change that. The next afternoon, someone pulled into my driveway. It wasn't him. It was his older sister, Celeste. We had always gotten along. She was the one who helped him choose my engagement ring. The one who cried when I told the family I was a match. She stood on my porch holding a paper bag from my favorite bakery. I wasn't sure you'd open the door. I almost didn't. I know. She looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Can I come in? For a while, neither of us touched the coffee I'd made. Finally, she looked at me. I owe you an apology. You didn't ask me to give your brother my kidney. No. She lowered her eyes. But I watched everything happen, and I said nothing. The room fell quiet. I need you to answer one question, I said. She nodded. Did he stop loving me? She looked up so quickly it caught me off guard. No. The answer came without hesitation. Then why is he doing this? She let out a long breath. Because he's trying to save everyone. I frowned. What does that mean? My mother gave him a choice. I felt my stomach tighten. What choice? Celeste looked away. She told him if he married you, she would cut him out of the family business. I stared at her. He doesn't care about the business. He didn't. She swallowed. But after the transplant, she reminded him that the business employs 43 people. I blinked. What? If it collapses, 43 families lose their income. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother told him he'd be choosing between one woman or 43 households. I stood and walked to the window. I gave him my kidney. I know. I nearly died. I know. And he couldn't choose me? Behind me, Celeste's voice trembled. He did. I turned. What? He chose you. I frowned. What are you talking about? The night before your surgery. He told my mother he was marrying you no matter what. Hope flickered inside me, only to disappear when she continued. She didn't argue. She waited. Until after the transplant. The words hit me like ice water. So, he woke up believing he'd have to choose all over again. Celeste nodded slowly. And this time, he believed everyone would pay the price for choosing you. Tears filled my eyes. Not because I finally understood, because I almost did. I could see the trap. A man recovering from major surgery. A lifetime of trying to earn his mother's approval. The crushing weight of believing dozens of innocent people depended on him. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained why the man who had promised to spend forever with me had walked away looking like he'd left part of himself behind. Celeste reached into her purse and placed a small velvet pouch on the table. What's this? He asked me to give it to you. I opened it. Inside was a simple silver necklace. Not expensive. Not new. I recognized it instantly. It was the necklace I'd worn on the day he proposed. There was a folded note tucked beneath it. Just one sentence. I couldn't save my life twice by destroying yours. I read it again. Then a third time. My hands began to shake. I looked up at Celeste. What does he mean by that? She wiped away a tear. I was hoping you'd be the one to tell me. I read the note again. I couldn't save my life twice by destroying yours. It didn't sound like a goodbye. It sounded like a confession. I looked at Celeste. Tell me everything. She nodded slowly. You deserve that much. My mother wasn't always like this. I stayed silent. When our father died, the business was drowning in debt. Loans. Lawsuits. Suppliers threatening to walk away. My brother was 23. He gave up graduate school to keep the company alive. I frowned. He never told me that. He wouldn't. He hates looking like someone who needs saving. She managed a sad smile. Then he got sick. The kidney failure came at the worst possible time. The business was finally recovering, but only because a major investor agreed to come in. I felt my chest tighten. The investor had one condition. Celeste looked down. They wanted the company to stay in the family. I didn't understand. What does that have to do with me? She hesitated. Everything. My mother had been negotiating for months. She promised the investor's family that my brother would marry their daughter. The room went completely still. I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. That's impossible. He was engaged to me. I know. He loved me. I know. So why would anyone believe that? Because my mother never told them about you. I stared at her. What? To them, you never existed. A heavy silence settled between us. Then everything started making sense. The rushed engagement. The excuses whenever I suggested combining our families for holiday dinners. The way his mother always insisted she would handle conversations with business partners. She hadn't been protecting us. She had been hiding me. So after the transplant, I couldn't finish the sentence. Celeste did it for me. My mother told him the investor was ready to sign, but only if he honored the arrangement she'd made. And if he refused, the company would collapse. I closed my eyes. The betrayal wasn't just cruel. It had been planned. Long before I entered the operating room. I have one question. Celeste nodded. Did he know about this before I donated my kidney? Her eyes filled with tears. No. He found out the morning after your surgery. I searched her face. You're sure? I was there. My mother waited until he couldn't even walk across the room without help. She told him everything while he was still recovering. I felt something inside me break. Not because he had chosen silence. Because someone had waited until he was at his weakest. To force the biggest decision of his life. I stood and walked to the kitchen sink. The scar beneath my shirt still ached. I rested my hand against the counter. When you love someone, I said quietly, you expect life to test your love. I turned back to her. You never expect the test to come from the people who are supposed to love them first. Celeste lowered her head. My brother hasn't slept since he left. He goes to work. He comes home. He sits in the dark. He won't even unpack the apartment my mother rented for him. I didn't answer. Because none of that changed what he'd done. Pain could explain a choice. It couldn't erase it. Celeste stood. I should go. She stopped at the door. Can I ask you one thing? What if he finally tells the truth? Will you at least listen? I looked at the engagement ring still lying on my coffee table, the ring I dreamed of wearing for the rest of my life. I'll listen. I paused. But listening doesn't mean I can forgive. Celeste nodded. I wouldn't expect you to. She left. That evening, just before sunset, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't him. It was the hospital. Miss Carter? Yes. This is the transplant coordinator. My heart skipped. Is something wrong? I'm calling because your fiancé came in this afternoon for his follow-up appointment. I gripped the phone tighter. He left something here. What is it? The coordinator hesitated. A letter. He asked us to give it to you. Only if he never found the courage to do it himself. I closed my eyes. For the first time since the surgery, I wasn't afraid of what I might discover. I was afraid that the truth might hurt even more than the betrayal. The call came just before sunset. I almost ignored it. The screen showed his name. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. I've resigned. I frowned. Resigned from what? The company. My heart skipped. What? My mother doesn't know yet. His voice was calm. Too calm. I signed everything this afternoon. The board accepted it. I've walked away. I leaned against the kitchen counter. You spent years building that company. I know. You gave it up? I should have given it up before I gave you up. The words hung between us. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued. I called because there's something I should have told you the day I left. I closed my eyes. I'm listening. The morning after the surgery, my mother told me she had arranged another marriage for me. I know. No. His voice cracked. You don't. She told me she'd made the arrangement months before I got sick. If I refused, she'd destroy the company. I remained silent. But that's not why I walked away. For the first time, I felt my heart race. Then why did you? His breathing grew heavier. Because she came into your hospital room before you woke up. My stomach tightened. She told me the doctors were worried about your recovery. She said there was a chance your remaining kidney had been damaged. If you're still watching, you're exactly the kind of viewer we make these stories for. If you love emotional stories with unforgettable twists and endings that stay with you long after they're over, take a second to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. I stopped breathing. She looked me in the eye and said, he struggled to continue. If she gets worse because of this surgery, you'll spend the rest of your life blaming yourself. A tear rolled down my cheek. I believed her. I thought if I stayed, you'd fight to keep the wedding alive. And if your health got worse, you'd blame yourself for ruining my future. So I became the villain. I thought it would make letting go easier for you. I covered my mouth. It was the cruelest decision he'd ever made. And somehow, he had believed it was protecting me. It was the worst mistake of my life, he whispered. I know that now. So why are you telling me this today? Because I finally saw my medical file. The doctor laughed when I asked about your condition. He said, she was recovering beautifully from the beginning. Silence. My mother lied. The room spun. Not because she'd lied. Because one lie had stolen 4 lives. Mine. His. Our future. And even hers. I've spent 4 years trying to become the man she wanted, he said quietly. This morning, I asked myself one question. What question? If the woman who loved me enough to give me her kidney couldn't change me, what was I still protecting? He took a slow breath. So I resigned. For the first time in my life, I chose something my mother didn't. Before I could answer, he spoke again. I've written one last letter. It's not an apology. It can't be. It's a confession. I've sent copies to everyone. My family, the board, the investors. They'll all read it tomorrow morning. What did you write? His answer came without hesitation. The truth. And tomorrow, my mother will hear it from me instead of hiding behind me. The line went quiet. Then, very softly, he said, I should have fought for you before you fought for me. The call ended. I stood in my kitchen long after the screen went dark. Tomorrow wasn't going to decide whether we belonged together. Tomorrow would answer a different question. Could a man who had spent his entire life obeying finally find the courage to tell the truth? Even if it cost him everything? The next morning, his letter was everywhere. Not online. Not on social media. Exactly where he said it would be. Every board member, every investor, every member of both families received the same envelope. No excuses. No edited version. Just the truth. I didn't read it first. Gideon did. He looked up from the last page and quietly said, He's finally telling the story he should have told months ago. He handed it to me. The first line made my chest tighten. If you're reading this, stop blaming the woman who saved my life. I kept reading. He admitted everything. That he had abandoned me. That no one had forced him to leave. That fear had made the decision. That his mother's manipulation explained his choice, but did not excuse it. Then came the last paragraph. If anyone deserves to lose your respect, let it be me. She gave me life. I repaid her with silence. Don't let my failure become her punishment. I lowered the letter. For the first time since the surgery, he had stopped protecting himself. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Family members, friends, people who had quietly assumed I'd been left because something had gone wrong between us. One by one, they apologized. Not because they finally understood my pain, because they finally understood his. That evening, there was another knock at my door. This time, it was his mother. She looked different. No pearls, no perfect blazer, just an exhausted woman who suddenly looked her age. She didn't ask to come inside. I only need 5 minutes. I nodded. She remained on the porch. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she surprised me. I read his letter. I waited. He resigned this morning. I know. He said he couldn't spend another day building a future on the ruins of someone else's. Her voice cracked. I spent my whole life teaching my son how to survive. She looked at me. I never realized I was teaching him how to be afraid. It wasn't an apology. Not completely. But it was the first honest thing I'd ever heard her say. She reached into her handbag and held out a small velvet box. I recognized it immediately. My engagement ring. I don't think this belongs to my family anymore. I looked at the ring, but didn't take it. Quietly, I closed her fingers around it. No, it belongs to the woman who chose it with her son. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time in her life, she had no answer. She nodded once, turned around, and walked away, not defeated, just finally carrying the weight she'd spent years placing on everyone else. As the sun disappeared beyond the trees, my phone buzzed. One message. From him. I'm outside. I looked through the living room window. He wasn't standing at the door. He wasn't asking to come in. He was sitting on the curb across the street, exactly where a man sits when he knows he no longer has the right to knock. I stood there watching him. He never looked toward the house. He simply waited. Not for forgiveness. Not for another chance. Just for me to decide whether our story deserved one final conversation. I watched him from the window for almost 10 minutes. He never knocked. Never called. Never tried to make me feel guilty. He just sat there, looking at the house we had once picked together. I finally opened the front door. He stood the moment he saw me. I won't keep you long, he said. I know. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then I walked past him and sat on the porch steps. After a moment, he sat one step below me. Not beside me. Below me. Like a man who finally understood he had no place asking for equality after everything he'd done. I've replayed that morning 1,000 times, he said quietly. The morning I left. I know exactly where I should have turned back. I didn't answer. I keep thinking. If I'd walked into your room. If I'd held your hand. If I'd told you the truth. I looked at him. But you didn't. He nodded. I didn't. And that's the only part of the story neither of us can rewrite. The evening breeze carried the scent of fresh rain. It reminded me of the morning I had signed the consent forms for my surgery. Back then, I thought love meant giving everything you had. Now I knew something different. Love also requires someone capable of protecting what you've given. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a folded document between us. I wanted you to have this. I opened it. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't an apology. It was the official confirmation that he had declined every share of the company his mother had spent decades building. At the bottom, his signature. Nothing else. I kept waiting for you to do something that would make me forgive you, I said. He smiled sadly. I stopped trying to earn forgiveness. I know. I finally realized that's your decision. He stood. I only wanted you to know that the last important choice of my life was finally my own. He turned to leave, then stopped. Without facing me, he asked, "Can I ask you one selfish question?" I nodded. "Did you ever regret saving my life?" The question settled over us like a heavy blanket. I thought about the operating room, the scar, the sleepless nights, the tears, the dreams we'd buried. Then I answered, "No." He closed his eyes. "You should." "I don't." I stood and walked until I was in front of him. I regret loving a man who was too afraid to stand beside me. I gently placed my hand over the scar on his side. but I'll never regret saving a life. His shoulders began to shake. I don't deserve that. No, you don't. I removed my hand. But that's the difference between what I gave you and what you gave me. He looked at me, confused. I gave you a kidney expecting nothing in return. You gave me promises and took them back. Silence. Deep. Honest. Final. I smiled, not because I was happy, because I was finally free. I hope you live a very long life. His eyes filled with tears. I hope every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary Tuesday reminds you that someone once loved you enough to give you a second chance at life. I paused. And I hope you spend that life becoming the man she believed you already were. A tear rolled down his face. I will. I know. For the first time since we met. I believed him completely. That was what made walking away so hard. And so necessary. I turned toward my front door. Just before I stepped inside, he called my name one last time. I looked back. He rested his hand over the scar beneath his ribs. Every morning I wake up. The first heartbeat I feel reminds me of you. I held his gaze. Then I answered with the only words that still mattered. Then make sure it reminds you to never let fear choose love for you again. I went inside. I closed the door. I never saw him again. Months later, I received a handwritten card from the transplant center. Inside was a single sentence from a young recipient whose surgery had been successful. Because someone like you said yes, my children still have their father. I read those words 3 times. Then I folded the card and placed it beside the photograph I'd almost thrown away after the breakup. Not because it reminded me of the man I lost, but because it reminded me of the woman I refused to lose. In the end, the greatest gift I ever gave wasn't my kidney. It was refusing to let someone else's betrayal change the kind of person I chose to be. If this story touched you, there's another waiting for you right here. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next unforgettable story.